I witnessed something this afternoon that a mother should never have to see. My son David, the boy I raised with every ounce of my being, was rummaging through my private financial records like a common burglar in my own study. And the most terrifying part? He has no idea that I saw him. He doesn't know that the new smart display he bought me, the one with the little camera, was recording his every move. If you want to hear how this story of betrayal unfolds, make sure you're following, because I post a new story every single day. It all began last week when David brought home this fancy new gadget. "It'll help you with recipes, Mom," he'd said, his voice full of that false concern I was starting to see through. "You can video call the grandkids too. I'm a 70-year-old woman living on my own since my dear husband passed, and David and his wife, Sarah, had moved in 6 months ago, insisting they needed to keep an eye on me." How naive I was. I never even thought about the camera, and I certainly didn't think to mention to them that I'd figured out how to check its recording history. I was so accustomed to them managing my life that it felt like a small act of rebellion. Thank heavens for that little rebellion, or I would have walked straight into their trap. This morning, after David said he was off to a job fair and Sarah was supposedly at a yoga class, I decided to play around with the device. The technician who helped me set it up showed me how it automatically records when it detects motion. I nearly didn't check, but a little voice in my head insisted. I tapped the history icon on the screen, and there they were. The images were so clear they stole the breath from my lungs. David and Sarah hadn't gone anywhere. They were right there in my study, with my entire life savings documented in paper spread across my desk. David was holding my portfolio statement, the very one I kept in a locked drawer. Sarah was holding other papers, tilting them toward the light. "Are you sure these are the original bond certificates?" I heard Sarah's voice, sharp and greedy, through the device's speaker. "Vance said he needs the originals to make the transfer look legitimate." Vance. The name made my skin crawl. He was some slick financial advisor David had met, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. Now I knew why I'd distrusted him. "They have to be," David answered, his voice thick with a desperate kind of energy. "Mom is so organized with this stuff. She keeps everything in perfect order." That word, organized, was once a compliment from him. Now he said it like it was an obstacle. Sarah moved closer to the desk, holding up a statement. "Look at this, David. The portfolio is worth over $800,000. Vance was right. This is worth the risk." The money I had saved over 40 years of working as a school librarian. The nest egg my husband and I built, the one I was planning to leave to David, not for him to plunder while I was still breathing. "As soon as we get the power of attorney signed," Sarah went on, "we can liquidate everything. We can move her into a managed care facility. A small studio will be fine for her remaining time." Her remaining time. They spoke of me as if I was already gone, a piece of furniture to be moved and stored. I watched through the camera's eye as David walked toward my bedroom. He started opening drawers, searching frantically. "She must have a safety deposit box key somewhere," he muttered. She was always so cautious about these things. Cautious. Another virtue now twisted into a flaw. He returned to the study empty-handed, his face red with anger. Sarah was waiting, tapping her foot impatiently. "Vance needs the papers by the end of the week," she snapped. "Without them, he can't set up the new accounts. And without those accounts, we're stuck living off the allowance your mother doles out." Allowance? She called the $1,000 a month I gave them for their expenses an allowance. Money from my own retirement savings, given freely to help them get on their feet. "We'll just have to be more persuasive," David said, sinking into my husband's old reading chair. "We'll tell her they're for updating her insurance policies, something she needs to sign urgently. She's been so forgetful lately, she'll just sign where we tell her to." Forgetful. It was true I sometimes misplaced my glasses or forgot a name, perfectly normal things for my age. But they had been nurturing this idea, making me question my own mind whenever I disagreed with them. "What if she wants to read them?" Sarah asked. David just shrugged, an act of indifference that shattered my heart into a million pieces. "What's she going to do? Call a lawyer about her own son? Besides, once Vance has the signed power of attorney, it's game over." Sarah smiled then, a chilling, predatory smile. "Perfect. Tomorrow we'll bring her Vance's documents and tell her it's to simplify her estate for the future. She'll sign without a second thought. They started putting my papers away, but not with the care I always took. They shoved them into folders, creasing the edges. It was like they wanted me to know my order had been violated. Before leaving the study, David paused and looked right at the smart display. My blood ran cold. I thought he knew, but he just stood there for a moment, lost in thought. "I just wish it didn't have to be this way," he mumbled, mostly to himself. "Are you having second thoughts?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with venom. "No, but..." David sighed. "She's my mother, Sarah. She raised me by herself after Dad died. She worked so hard for everything we have." For a split second, a tiny ember of hope flickered within me. Maybe my boy was still in there somewhere. But Sarah stepped toward him, placing a hand on his arm. "David, honey, think about our business. Think about the life we deserve. Are we going to let our future be dictated by an old woman who's losing her grip on reality? This money is our chance to finally be free." And just like that, with her poisonous words, the last trace of my son vanished. I saw his face harden, his eyes go cold as greed washed over him once more. "You're right," he said. "It's time for us to come first." They left the room, and I sat there in the kitchen, staring at my tablet, which was connected to the display. I had just watched my own son and his wife plot my ruin. For 40 years, I had devoted myself to that man. I fed him, clothed him, educated him. I cheered his successes and nursed his failures. I gave up on finding love again to make sure he never felt second best. And now, the person I had built my world around had become its destroyer. But David and Sarah had made one critical mistake. They didn't know that their entire conspiracy was now saved in the cloud. They didn't know I had the evidence to turn their perfect plan into their worst nightmare. A war had started in my home, and they had no idea they were already losing. For the next 3 days, I became an actress in my own home. Outwardly, I was the same loving, slightly dotty mother they thought me to be. I made David's favorite pancakes. I asked Sarah about her yoga class. I smiled and nodded as they spoke of their day. But inside, I was a general planning a counteroffensive. I was documenting every lie, every manipulative comment, every piece of the puzzle that was the great betrayal of my life. That little smart display was my silent confidant. The motion-activated recordings gave me a 24-hour window into their scheming. On Tuesday, I watched them finalize their strategy. Sarah was on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, while David paced the living room floor. "Vance has the power of attorney documents ready," she told him. "But he said we absolutely need the original bond certificates to avoid any red flags with the bank." "What if Mom notices they're gone?" David asked, chewing on his thumbnail, a nervous habit I thought he'd outgrown. Sarah looked up from her screen, that cold smile playing on her lips again. "David, your mother is 70. She probably hasn't looked at those certificates in years. We can take them, have Vance process them, and put them back before she even knows." Take them. They spoke of stealing the foundation of my financial security as if they were borrowing a cup of sugar. "But what if..." David started, glancing toward the kitchen where I was humming to myself as I washed dishes. "What if what?" Sarah pressed. "What if she's not as forgetful as we think? She seems sharper lately, like she's watching us." My heart skipped a beat. Had I given myself away? Sarah let out a short, sharp laugh. "Please, David. Your mother spends her days doing crossword puzzles and watching old movies. If she were that sharp, she'd have figured out you haven't been on a real job interview in months." Months. So the entire story of his job search was a lie, a smokescreen to keep me placated while they plotted. "I guess you're right," David said, though he didn't sound convinced. "It's just, I feel like she's always disappointed in me." "That's your guilt talking," Sarah shot back. "You need to stop seeing her as your sainted mother and see her for what she is, a roadblock to our dreams." A roadblock. To the woman my son loved, I was no longer a person. I was an inconvenience. "Besides," Sarah continued, snapping the laptop shut, "once we have the funds, we can find a nice assisted living place for her, something clean and safe. With the $800,000 from the portfolio, we can launch our business, and there will still be more than enough to make sure she's comfortable." Assisted living. The words felt like a punch to the gut. They wanted to sell off my life's work, the security my husband and I had built, and use it to put me away. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. David sat beside her, and I saw his posture change, his anxiety seeming to melt away. "You really think this will work?" "Vance has done this before," Sarah said, running her fingers through his hair like he was a child. "He has a contact at the brokerage firm who can expedite the asset transfer. The money will be in our new business account within a month. A month." They had a timeline. "And Vance's fee?" David asked. "It's $50,000, she said calmly. "It's a lot, but it's an investment. We're talking about a net gain of over $700,000. $50,000. That was the price they put on my love, my trust, my entire life." For the rest of the day, I moved through the hours with a calm I didn't feel. I cooked a pot roast, his favorite. I listened to their empty chatter. I even offered them money for a date night. Every forced smile felt like a crack in my heart, but I needed to buy time, to think, to plan. That night, long after the house was dark and silent, I sat in the living room with my tablet. I rewatched every recording, my mind racing. I had their entire plan, confessed in their own words. I had dates, names, amounts. I had more than enough to call the police. But I hesitated. Maybe it was that last stubborn shred of a mother's love, hoping my son would awaken from this nightmare. Maybe I needed to understand just how far they would push. Or maybe I just needed to look my son in the eye one last time before I brought his world crashing down. Wednesday came with a gray drizzle that matched my mood. David and Sarah were quiet at breakfast, but the air was thick with unspoken plans. "Mom," David finally said, setting down his coffee cup, "we need to have a serious talk with you." This was it, the opening salvo. "Of course, sweetie," I said, taking a seat across from them. "What's on your mind?" Sarah slid a thick folder across the table. "Eleanor, we've been worried about your future, about making sure you're secure." "My security?" The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. "Yes," David chimed in, reaching for my hand with a tenderness that now felt vile. "We've been looking into estate planning, insurance, all the things a person your age should have sorted out." Sarah opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents filled with dense legal text. "A lawyer friend of ours, Mr. Vance, helped us prepare these papers to get all your affairs in order. It's just standard procedure." Vance, the architect of my ruin. "What kind of papers?" I asked, feigning the confusion they so desperately wanted to see in me. "Basically," David explained, "it's to make sure that if something were to happen to you, your estate and the ownership of your assets are properly managed. It also gives us authorization to handle your medical and financial decisions if you're ever unable." Authorization to handle my decisions. They wanted me to sign my life away. "It's for your protection, Eleanor," Sarah added, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "What if you had a fall or got sick? Without this, David couldn't even pay a bill for you." They handed me the papers. I could see the words irrevocable, transfer of assets, full power of attorney. "I don't quite understand all this legal language," I said, pushing the papers back. "Could you walk me through it?" I saw a flicker of annoyance in Sarah's eyes, but David kept his patient smile plastered on. "Mom, it's just boring legal stuff," he said. "The important part is that you sign on these lines." He pointed to several tabs marked with X. "The lawyer said it's time-sensitive because of some new tax laws that could be a problem if these aren't updated soon." Lies. A tangled web of lies to rush me into signing my own demise. "What if I want my own lawyer to look at them first?" I asked. "I'm a bit old-fashioned that way." Sarah's mask of patience slipped. "Eleanor, this is a 30-page document. It would cost a fortune and take weeks for another lawyer to review. And like David said, we're on a deadline." "Besides," David added, "this is Vance's specialty. We trust him completely." Trust him. The man who was going to charge them $50,000 to steal from me. "Well," I said, setting the papers down, "it's a big decision. Let me sleep on it." The silence that fell was heavy and cold. David and Sarah looked at each other, a flash of pure panic in their eyes. "Mom," David said, his voice now firm, We really need this signed today. Vance has an appointment for us first thing in the morning to file them." "What's the rush?" I pressed. Sarah leaned forward, her patience gone. "The rush is to protect you, Eleanor. Is there some reason you don't trust your own son?" There it was. The emotional blackmail I knew was coming, twisting my caution into a question of my love for them. "Of course I trust you," I lied, picking up the pen they had so helpfully placed on the documents. I watched them both visibly relax, a wave of triumphant relief washing over their faces. They thought they'd won. I held the pen just above the signature line, then paused. I think I'll call my old friend Margaret first. Her husband was a lawyer. She might be able to explain this to me in simpler terms." "Mom!" David shouted, his composure shattering completely. "You don't need to call anyone. Just sign the damn papers." The shout hung in the air, raw and ugly. In that instant, the play was over. I had pushed too hard, and the monster had shown its face. The war was no longer a secret. David's yell still echoed in the room as I looked at my son, truly looked at him, for the first time in a long, long time. The mask of the caring son was gone, replaced by the face of a desperate stranger, furious that his plan had hit a snag. "David," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I set the pen down. "Why are you raising your voice at me?" He blinked, realizing his mistake. He tried to pull the mask back on, running a hand through his hair and forcing a laugh. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so stressed. This job hunt, the finances, it's all getting to me." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, a silent command to get himself under control. "What David means," she said smoothly, "is that we're just trying to look out for you, and it's frustrating when you fight us on it." Fight them on it. As if my desire to protect myself was an act of childish rebellion. "I understand you're stressed," I said, standing up from the table. "But I will not be shouted at in my own home, and I am not signing anything until I have it reviewed." The finality in my voice seemed to stun them. "I'm old, David, but I am not a fool." "Nobody called you a fool, Mom," he muttered, but his eyes were hard. "Then stop treating me like one," I retorted. I gathered the documents and put them in a kitchen drawer. It was a small act of defiance, but I needed to show them, and myself, that I was still in control. They remained at the table, their heads together, whispering furiously. I went to my room saying I needed to rest, but really, I needed to check my ally. In the privacy of my locked room, I opened the app on my tablet. The camera in the living room was perfectly positioned. "This is not going how we planned," Sarah was saying, her voice a low hiss. "I told you she was getting more suspicious." "How could she know anything?" David shot back. "Did you say something to someone?" "Of course not. I'm not an idiot," Sarah snapped. She tapped her chin, thinking. "We have to change tactics. If she won't sign willingly, we have to force her hand." "What do you mean?" "Your mother is comfortable," Sarah said, a cruel intelligence in her eyes. "She has her pension, but we handle a lot of the extras, don't we? The car insurance, the bigger grocery bills, her supplemental health plan." "Yeah, but her basics are covered." "Exactly, the basics," Sarah said with a sly smile. "What happens when the extras disappear, when life gets a little less comfortable?" The cold-blooded nature of their new plan began to dawn on me. They were going to squeeze me, to create a crisis to make me utterly dependent on them. "If we cut back our financial help," she explained, "she'll have to rely only on the public transit system. She'll have to cancel her private insurance. She'll have to carry her own heavy groceries. She'll feel vulnerable. She'll feel alone." "And then," David said, catching on, a grim admiration in his voice, "she'll have to sign the papers to get our help back." "Precisely. We'll tell her we're having a financial crisis, that we can't afford to support her anymore unless we have some legal security about our shared future." Shared future. They spoke of my life as a financial asset, an investment they were managing. "How long do you think it will take?" David asked. "A 70-year-old woman used to her comforts?" Sarah shrugged. "A month, tops." "A month, the same timeline they needed to liquidate my assets." I watched them get up and go to their room. I could hear the muffled sounds of them making calls. They would cancel my insurance. They would stop the automatic payments for my car. They were systematically dismantling the life I had carefully built, all to break my spirit. The most terrifying part was that their plan was brilliant. They knew my routines, my comforts, my vulnerabilities, and they were going to use them all against me. That afternoon, the first blow fell. "Mom," David said, coming into the living room where I was pretending to read, "I had to call the insurance company. We're a little tight on cash, so I had to suspend your supplemental health policy for now. It's just temporary." A lie. He had no legal right to do that, but he was counting on the fact that I wouldn't know that I would be too scared or confused to question him. Sarah was at the table with a notepad, making a list. My medications, my doctor's appointments, my weekly trip to the market. "We're going to have to stop using the car for non-essentials," she announced later, not even looking at me. "Gas is just too expensive right now." Every word was a carefully placed stone in the wall they were building around me. That night, after they were asleep, I sat in the dark. I had all the evidence I needed: recordings of their conspiracy, their plans for financial and emotional abuse. But still, I couldn't bring myself to call the police. There was a part of me, the mother in me, that needed to give my son one last chance. I needed to confront him, to show him I knew everything, and to see if there was any love or decency left in his heart. I decided my own plan would begin the next day. They wanted to play a game of psychological warfare. I would show them what 70 years of life experience looked like. But first, I made sure my evidence was safe. I downloaded every video file from the cloud onto a small USB drive, which I hid inside an old music box they never looked at. I also uploaded everything to a private online storage account, sending the password to my trusted friend, Margaret. If anything happened to me, the truth would not die with me. Thursday morning dawned, bright and clear, a stark contrast to the darkness that had filled my home. David and Angelica greeted me with fake smiles, but I could feel their anticipation. They were waiting for me to crack. "Morning, Mom," David said. "Slept well?" "Like a log," I lied. I had been awake all night, rehearsing what I had to do. "Good," Sarah said, "because we need to talk about some budget cuts around the house." Their performance began. I sat at the table, feigning ignorance. "What kind of cuts?" I asked, sipping my tea. "Well, Mom," David began, his face a mask of sorrow, "the job market is just so tough. And our savings are almost gone," Sarah finished for him. Their savings. The only savings in this house were mine. "So that means," David continued, his voice grave, "we have to temporarily stop helping with things like your extra insurance, the car for your appointments, some of the specialty groceries you like." He paused for dramatic effect. "It's just until we can get back on our feet." "And how do you plan to do that?" I asked, my voice even. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Well, Eleanor, if we could get those legal papers signed, it would give us the security we need to make some long-term financial plans for the whole family. Long-term plans, selling my assets and putting me in a home." "I see," I said, my calm unnerving them. "So the papers aren't just for my protection, are they?" They froze. I had connected the dots out loud. The financial pressure and the fraudulent documents were two sides of the same coin. "Mom," David started, "we just want what's best for everyone." "No," I said, my voice finally rising as I stood up. "You want what's best for you, and you are willing to destroy your own mother to get it." The accusation hung in the air between us. The secret war was now an open declaration. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. David and Sarah stared at me, their expressions a mixture of shock and rapid calculation. The game had changed. I was no longer the frail, confused mother they thought they could manipulate. "Mom," David finally managed, his voice dripping with that fake concern that now turned my stomach. "I think you're twisting our words." "Am I?" I said, crossing my arms. "Then explain to me why your so-called financial troubles started the exact day I refused to sign documents you wouldn't let me properly review." Sarah tried to intervene, her condescending smile firmly in place. "Eleanor, we know all this legal talk can be overwhelming." I'm not overwhelmed. I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. I'm heartbroken. The word landed between them like a stone. I saw David flinch, as if the reality of his actions had finally hit him. Heartbroken, I repeated, letting the words sink in. By the son I raised by myself after his father died. The son I worked 2 jobs to send to college. The son who is now trying to steal my life savings. I'm not trying to steal anything, David yelled, slamming his hand on the table. Everything I'm doing is for our future. Our future? I let out a bitter laugh. David, your future involves putting me in a facility with my own money. How is that our future? They exchanged a look of pure alarm. I had just revealed I knew far more than they thought possible. I don't know what crazy ideas you've gotten into your head, Sarah stammered, her confidence gone. Ideas? I pulled out my tablet and set it on the table. Or would you like me to play you the recording of your exact words? About finding a clean and safe place for me? About how the $800,000 would be more than enough? The color drained from their faces. David looked at the tablet as if it were a venomous snake. You were recording us? He whispered. No, I said, my voice deadly calm. You recorded yourselves. You just forgot that the helpful little smart display your son bought me has a camera, and you forgot to turn it off while you plotted to ruin my life. Sarah shot up from her chair, nearly knocking it over. How long? How long have you been spying on us? Since Tuesday, I said. 4 full days. I have recordings of you talking about Vance, the $50,000 fee for his services, your plan to liquidate my portfolio. Everything. David stood up too, looking like a cornered animal. Mom, please, just let me explain. Explain what? My voice rose with the fury I had suppressed for days. That your wife sees me as a roadblock? That you lied about looking for work while you were planning a heist? That you think my 40 years of hard work are worth nothing more than a cash prize for you to grab? It's not like that, he shouted, his eyes filling with tears of desperation, not remorse. Then tell me, David. I stepped toward him until I was just inches away. When Sarah said you needed to stop seeing me as your sainted mother and start seeing me as a roadblock, what did you say? He was silent. He knew I had the recording. You said, "You're right. It's time for us to come first." Those were your words, David. After everything I've done for you, you decided it was time to put me last. David sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of the son I once knew. But Sarah was not finished. Fine, she said, her composure returning with terrifying speed. So you have recordings. What are you going to do with them? The question was a challenge, not a plea. Excuse me? I asked. I'm asking what your plan is, she repeated, crossing her arms. Because last I checked, David is your only child. Are you really going to call the cops on your own son? Destroy your own family over some money? The sheer audacity of her question left me breathless. She was still trying to manipulate me, even now. Destroy my family? I said slowly. Sarah, you two already did that. I'm just trying to survive. Survive? She scoffed. You're a 70-year-old woman. Who do you have besides us? What are you going to do, Eleanor? Tell the police you've been secretly recording us? They'll think you're a crazy old woman. There was a certainty in her tone that frightened me. I have proof, I insisted. You have recordings you made without our consent, she countered smoothly. Any half-decent lawyer would say they're inadmissible. They'd say you're a paranoid old woman who's been spying on her family. My confidence wavered. Was she right? Could my only evidence be worthless? Besides, she continued, circling the table like a shark, who will a judge believe? 2 concerned children, or a mother who is clearly showing signs of paranoia, inventing conspiracies, isolating herself? I'm not isolating myself, I protested, but my voice was weaker now. She stopped in front of me. When was the last time you went out with your friends, Eleanor? When was the last time you left this house for anything other than a doctor's appointment? David's told me how you've been. Forgetful. Distrustful. David lifted his head, his voice now eerily calm. It's true, Mom. We've been worried about you. That's why we wanted the power of attorney, so we could help you if your mind keeps getting worse. My mind getting worse. They were trying to build a narrative where I was the villain, the crazy one. You know there is nothing wrong with my mind, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Are you sure? Sarah challenged. A woman who sets up secret cameras to spy on her own son? Who concocts elaborate stories about being robbed? Those sound like delusions, Eleanor. They are not delusions. I heard you talking about Vance and the $50,000. Vance is a legitimate financial planner, Sarah said without blinking. The $50,000 is his standard fee for restructuring a complex estate. It's all perfectly legal. And the assisted living facility? Selling my assets? Mom, David sighed, as if talking to a child. We were discussing long-term care options in case you ever needed them. That's what responsible children do. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. They were twisting every piece of evidence, every damning word, and using it as proof of my supposed insanity. But you called me a roadblock, I whispered, my resolve crumbling. We said your refusal to plan for the future was a roadblock to us being able to help you, Sarah corrected, her voice sickeningly patient. Mom, David said, stepping closer and placing his hands on my shoulders. We love you. We're worried. This isn't normal behavior. Maybe you should talk to a doctor. A doctor. A psychiatrist. They wanted to have me declared incompetent. But then, a thought cut through the fog of their lies. A lifeline. If it's all so innocent, I said, my strength returning, then you won't mind if we take these documents to my friend Margaret's son to review. He's a lawyer. The silence that followed was my answer. I saw it in their eyes, the panic they had tried so hard to conceal. Of course, Sarah finally said, but her voice was strained. We can do that. But she was lying. And she knew that I knew it. This was no longer just about my money. It was about my sanity. And that was a battle I refused to lose. The days that followed were a living nightmare. David and Sarah shifted their tactics from aggression to a kind of cloying, suffocating concern that was far more terrifying. They began treating me like a psychiatric patient. It started with a phone call I overheard David making that afternoon. Dr. Evans? He said, his voice loud enough for me to hear from the living room. This is David Miller, Eleanor's son. I'm calling because I'm extremely concerned about my mother's mental health. She's exhibiting some severe paranoid delusions. Dr. Evans had been my doctor for 20 years. He knew me. He trusted me. Or so I thought. Yes, doctor. Delusions, David continued. She believes we're trying to steal from her. She's even set up a camera to spy on us. We're afraid she might be a danger to herself. The cold, calculated cruelty of it left me paralyzed. He was using my discovery of his crime as the main symptom of my supposed illness. He was building a case against my sanity, brick by poisonous brick. I ran to my room to grab my tablet, needing to record this call, but when I tried to listen in, the audio on the living room camera was suddenly disabled. Another coincidence? I knew better. For the rest of the day, they hovered over me. Are you feeling all right, Mom? David would ask every few minutes. No dizziness? No confusion? You seem a bit distracted, Eleanor, Sarah would say. Are you sure you're sleeping enough? Every question was a loaded gun. If I admitted to feeling tired or forgetful, it was a symptom. If I denied it, I was in denial about my deteriorating condition. That night, I heard them whispering in their room. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Evans for Friday, David said. We need to get her condition officially on record. What if she won't go? Sarah asked. We'll tell her it's a routine blood pressure check. Once we get her there, we can talk to the doctor privately and explain what's been happening. You think he'll believe us over her? Sarah, we're her devoted children living with her and caring for her. He sees cases of dementia in the elderly all the time. Our story will fit right in. They were right. An elderly woman accusing her loving family of a vast conspiracy? It sounded like a textbook case of paranoia. But they had forgotten one thing, 20 years of medical records showing a perfectly healthy mind. Friday morning, David announced the doctor's appointment. Just a quick checkup, Mom, he said with his new, condescending tone. I don't need a checkup. I feel fine, I said firmly. Sometimes the people who are sick are the last to know, Sarah said with a sad, sympathetic smile. We're just worried, that's all. I'm not going, I declared. Yes, you are, David said, his voice hard as steel. It's for your own good. And if I refuse? Then, he said slowly, we'll have to explore other options to ensure you're safe. Other options. A forced psychiatric evaluation. I knew that's what he meant. Fine, I said. That afternoon, when they went out to run errands, I made a call of my own. Dr. Evans, this is Eleanor Miller, I said when his nurse put me through. Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. Your son was just telling me you've been a bit under the weather. The seeds of their story had already been planted. Doctor, I said, my voice low and urgent, I need to see you. Alone. Before my appointment on Friday. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Eleanor, is everything all right at home? Are you safe? The question was direct, professional. He'd dealt with elder abuse cases before. Doctor, my son and his wife are trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can steal my life savings. When I discovered their plan, they started building a case to make me seem paranoid and delusional. The silence on the line was longer this time. Eleanor, those are extremely serious allegations. I know, and I have proof, I said. I told him everything. About the smart display, the recordings, the conversation with Vance, the power of attorney. Where is this proof now? He asked. They figured out I was recording them. I lied. A sudden, desperate plan forming in my mind. They found my USB drive and erased it. They've been gaslighting me, making me think I imagined it all. And how do you know you didn't? It was a fair question. Because an hour ago, I continued, the lie growing, I overheard David on the phone with Vance, the lawyer. They were finalizing the plan. He said they had found a doctor who would sign off on a competency evaluation for $5,000. Dr. Evans was quiet, but I could hear him taking notes. Eleanor, I have known you for 20 years. You have never shown a single sign of cognitive decline. Your last full workup was 6 months ago, and you were sharp as a tack. But David told you I was delusional. David told me his version of the story, the doctor said, his voice firm. And now I have heard yours. I believe we need to get a baseline to prove your competency officially. For the first time in weeks, a wave of relief washed over me. Someone believed me. What do we do? I asked. First, you are coming to my office tomorrow morning for a full cognitive assessment. We will document officially that you are of sound mind. Second, I am giving you the number of a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Her name is Ms. Albright. Call her immediately. And Eleanor, don't let your son know anything about this. The next 2 hours in Dr. Evans's office were draining. He put me through a battery of tests for memory, reasoning, and orientation. I passed every single one with flying colors. Eleanor, he said, looking at the results, you have the cognitive function of a woman 20 years younger. I am writing a full medical report stating that you are perfectly capable of managing all your own legal and financial affairs. I went home armed with a shield. When I walked in, David and Sarah were waiting. How was the checkup, Mom? David asked. The doctor says I'm fit as a fiddle, I said cheerfully. He said my memory is excellent for my age and all this stress is probably just from worrying about my estate. I watched the flicker of disappointment in their eyes, quickly masked by relief. So, Sarah asked, you're ready to sign the papers then? I am, I said with a smile. But the doctor agreed with me. It would be best to have Margaret's son, the lawyer, look them over with us. Just to be safe. We can all meet tomorrow afternoon to finalize everything. The look of triumph on their faces was sickening. They thought their plan was back on track. They thought they had won, but my own plan was just getting started. That afternoon, I met with Ms. Albright, the lawyer. She was sharp, compassionate, and furious on my behalf. With Dr. Evans's report, we have a strong foundation, she said. But what we need is irrefutable proof of their intent. Would you be willing to let us help you set up a sting? A sting? We'll have a private investigator come to your house tomorrow morning before they wake up. He'll fit you with a high-fidelity hidden microphone and place several micro cameras around the dining room. Everything they say during your meeting will be recorded. Is that legal? It is perfectly legal to record conversations in your own home to document criminal activity, she assured me. The next day was the final act. The investigator was in and out before dawn. I had a tiny microphone clipped to my collar and cameras hidden in a flower arrangement and a bookshelf. At 2 o'clock, we all sat down at the dining table. I had my tablet with me. "Okay, Mom," David began. "Let's go over these one last time so we can get them signed." "Perfect," I said. I let them talk, explaining the clauses that would give them total control. Then I began to push. "I'm still worried about this clause here," I said, pointing to a line. "The one that gives you the power to sell my assets without my direct consent." "Mom, that's just a standard clause for emergencies," David said, his patience already wearing thin. "What kind of emergencies? The kind where you decide I need to be in a home because my mind is getting worse?" The atmosphere turned icy. "I don't know what you're implying," Sarah said. "I'm implying that I know all about your plan. I know you think I'm paranoid and delusional. I know you think I've been inventing stories." "Because you have been," David snapped. "You've been spying on us, making wild accusations. So when you stood in this very room and talked about liquidating my $800,000 portfolio, was that a delusion? We were talking about protecting your assets. And when you told Sarah you wished it didn't have to be this way, but it was time to put yourselves first, what did you mean?" The color drained from David's face. The mask was gone. Now there was only rage. "You have been spying on us," he roared. "I have been protecting myself," I shot back. "From my own son, who decided it was easier to steal from his mother than to get a job." Sarah stood up, her eyes blazing. "You have no proof of any of this, you crazy old woman." "No proof?" I said calmly. I tapped my tablet, and the crystal-clear audio from that first recording filled the room. Sarah's voice, sharp and greedy. "The portfolio is worth over $800,000. Vance was right. This is worth the risk." Their faces were a picture of pure horror. We erased those recordings," David stammered. "We swapped your USB drive." "You did," I said, "but you forgot about the cloud." "It doesn't matter," Sarah screamed, lunging for the tablet. "In the end, you will sign these papers." "And if I don't?" David sneered, his face twisted with malice. "Then we move on to Plan B. We have a doctor who will certify you as incompetent for the right price. Then we'll have you put in the cheapest home we can find and take every last penny. Because frankly, Mom," he added, his voice dripping with venom, "you've outlived your usefulness." The confession, complete and undeniable. "I see," I said, a strange sense of peace washing over me. "So there is nothing left of the boy I raised?" "That boy is gone," he spat. "He got tired of living on scraps from his sainted mother." Just as he finished his sentence, the front door opened. Ms. Albright walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. "David Miller and Sarah Miller," one of the officers said, his voice booming in the sudden silence. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, and elder abuse." The shock on their faces was absolute. "You have no proof!" Sarah shrieked. I reached up and unclipped the small microphone from my collar, placing it gently on the table next to the fraudulent documents. "Actually," I said softly, "I have everything." The silence in the house after they were gone was the first real silence I had felt in months. It wasn't empty, it was peaceful. 3 months later, on the advice of Ms. Albright, David and Sarah took a plea bargain. They signed away all rights to my estate, agreed to a permanent restraining order, and were sentenced to 5 years of probation with mandatory counseling. They avoided prison, but I had my life back. Sometimes my friends ask if I regret it, turning in my only son. I tell them I don't regret raising a son. I regret not realizing sooner that the man he became was a stranger. My home is my sanctuary again, filled not with whispers and lies, but with the laughter of my friends and the warmth of the sun. I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about trust. And sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do is to let go. I tell a new story every single day, so be sure to come back tomorrow to hear another one. And if you simply can't wait, there are 2 more stories waiting for you on the screen right now that I think you'll find surprising. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you never miss what happens next in my little world.